Fatherhood for the Rest of Us with Brandon Handley. Because you're already great at everything else, why not fatherhood too?
So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey there, Fatherhood for the Rest of Us. I am on today with JimSheils, like Shields but no D, who is on a clear mission in his lifetime to deepen relationships and improve education for entrepreneurial families. His popular book, The Family Board Meeting, and the strategy that goes along with it have helped parents worldwide connect with their children in fun and experiential ways. By creating the education mix, Jim is also helping change our education system and better prepare our children for the more practical affairs of life. Often referred to as crazy glue for families, Jim and his wife, Jamie, are on a mission to revolutionize family life. They want to help you enjoy your family more than an average parent, balancing success at work with success at home. After all, you only have 18 summers to make memories with your children. Jim, thanks again for hopping on today. And before we get started, what's one question that nobody's asked you that you've been dying to answer?
Man, Well, that's a good question. I need to ponder that one for a few minutes, I think. How about we come back to that? Because I got to think about it. That's a good one to think about, though.
What's funny is, I listened to your podcast with Hal Elrod, and I don't think you can swing a cat in this space without kind of coming back to My Morning Miracle. I interviewed, I'm assuming you also familiar with John Broman, right?
He's a good buddy of mine. Yep.
Yes. So he usually starts this, and this is totally lifted from his. So John Broman, if you're out there, this is taken from you. There's the credit for that. But what's something we can do to help celebrate your day today?
Help me celebrate my day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the conversation just alone is good. I've been on a mission to make sure my kids get an education that I didn't, meaning that it actually had purpose, direction, not a lot of fluff, and supported their gifts and passions and talents and not otherwise. And today my 15-year-old son is on a fishing internship with a very, very successful young fisherman here in the Keys. And what I'm like to celebrate today is we took a different path with him, and I think he's going to be eons ahead by the time he's ready to leave the house than I ever was. By the time I left college, he actually has direction. He has some purpose. He's developing a skill that's shown in entrepreneurial ways. He can do very well financially, but also be happy. And that's what we wanted to create. So today, being here in the Florida Keys, and he's out being mentored by a young fisherman who, it's not about the money, but he's already at the age of 18 making 6 figures and making other investments around the business. It's pretty remarkable, and they love it. And he doesn't have to be forced. He already has a healthy obsession with it, and we're letting him go in the direction he wants to go. And that can be tough as a parent, and it's taken a lot of courage, I think, of me and my wife, and to re-script some things we were taught growing up. But I think it's going to pay off, and that's what I'm wanting to celebrate today for sure.
That's awesome. I love that. And this kind of comes from, I believe one of your mentors had told you, find their passions and pour gasoline on it. And sounds to me kind of like what you're doing here.
Find what they're passionate about, dump gasoline on it, and set it on fire. And the funny thing is, we've become good friends. This mentor of mine, him and his son have attended, his sons and himself have attended our retreat. We've done family events together. And I'm actually staying at his house right now, who gave me that event in the Florida Keys. And it's his older son who is mentoring my son.
Well, how about that? That's funny.
Yeah. I'll tell you, family is not about competition. I see some people out there that are always seeming to be promoting their kids' accomplishments. And there's a difference between being proud and promoting. And it's not what it's about. Family is not a competition. Some of the best family groups that I work with are about cooperation. And then there's others where it seems like it's a competition. And I'm all for pushing each other. But I've found that the people that work in cooperation to support each other and not always one-up each other or boast over the other are going to get way further. There's lots of different dad groups out there, family groups. Now it's what I'd be. Look for the groups that are about cooperation efforts to make the whole group come up instead of competitive efforts of people that try to get all the attention. It's a really important distinction I've learned, especially over the last 5 years.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's definitely a lot of spaces out there where you're going to find those competitive people, and it's easy to get drawn into that, right? As well, and unless you catch yourself and you can step away, and like you're saying, you can be one of the ones that helps to buoy the rest of those ships out there.
Yeah.
Um,
And nothing's wrong with competition. I want to make that clear. But when you're in a group or something like that, you want cooperative efforts, not competitive efforts. There's a big difference for that. And I think especially with family, family is a cooperation, not a competition. That's the biggest thing I've learned. And it goes so much better if you put it that way.
For sure. I like that. I like that a lot. One of the things that I find kind of interesting is that you married Jamie and she already had the two older children, like ages 5 and 7. That to me seems to, that takes a lot of courage, right? Because you weren't a parent before. Can we talk a little bit about what it was like entering into that, what your mindset was like, what you were looking forward to, and how you really embraced it?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I had a rule actually: no dating girls with children. I and luckily for myself, I had broken that rule um, because the day I met her, we had talked every day since that thing, and I think we were at a point when I met my wife. She was out for her birthday at this little neighborhood brew pub with her whole family, and I went up and did the cold call and actually introduced ourselves. And we had a short conversation. She didn't go out a lot, being a single mom, and yeah, we hit it off right away. And it was a big thing for me, but she was. Let me tell you this, and this is something I didn't realize that happened. It was August 17th, 2003. I went on a date in Bakersfield, California. I came home. And my famous word for going on a date was, nice person, wasn't really there. And I sat down at my desk, and it wasn't ego, it was all intuitive, just coming out of me of what am I really looking for in a girl? And I wrote out this one-page list. And that list was given to my wife, Jamie, 8 years later. Standing on a beach in Central Florida when I proposed to her. I said, I wrote you this letter 8 years ago. And she said, we've only been together a year. And I said, yeah. I said, but I wrote it 8 years ago. And when you read it, it's kind of Twilight Zone. It is her to a T. So I am a big believer in getting clear on what you want and being the person that you think will attract that. And it was a big step. Again, she is divorced early to a high school boyfriend, horrible situation of addiction, alcohol, abuse, things that she had to stand up for herself, get out of it, and got full custody of her two sons. And that's when I came into the picture a few years later. And it was a big thing, but we hit it off right away. Our core values were the same. We were past the stage of games. There's no hold off 6 days before you text them and then only do a one-word thing and then hold. Like, I don't play that shit. I was way past that. By the first date, we took a walk on the beach with our two of our dogs. And I had no intention of playing games. I wanted to discuss core values and said, how do you feel about having more kids? What's the situation with your ex-husband? Like, it was very direct, and she could do the same to me. And we just shared so many things from kids' education to adventure, tropical travel to being more spiritual and less religious. And there were just some core values, but we went right for them. There was no desperation on either side. Each of us was an independent person living on our own, but we didn't want to play any games, and that felt really, really good. And I think it helped that the boys and I hit it off famously right away. I mean, I always had a dad, so I know at 5 and 7 having a dad around was really important. And the only dad that they had seen who had been, pretty much out of the picture for the most part, just was not of sober presence if he was around most of the time. And that's a hard thing. And there were trust issues in the beginning, which I talk about in my book. I talked about on Hal's show, and it had been especially hard on my oldest son, Alden, who's actually out now on his fishing internship. It's incredible to see what happens 8 years later. But when I first came into Alden's life, he was a terrible student, close to failing. He had been put on the spectrum at school for autism, and he suffered every night from night terrors. And if you don't know what those are, it's awful. It's when your child wakes up in a half-conscious state, completely terrified, and it can take hours to get him back to sleep. And I knew these. Yeah,
my oldest had that. It was scary. I mean, downright scary, right? They walk into your room and they seem like they're conscious, but they are nowhere near.
No, and they can come out of nowhere from a good home, or his were stress induced. I mean, there's no, But I've been accused of being a naive optimist. I was already actually as like more of a fun uncle working with entrepreneur families. Somehow you just by osmosis move into these things where I think it's because I got into the game so early. I was a medium age between the kids at home and the entrepreneurs at the events. And somehow I would get calls or they'd come to visit and I'd take them out surfing and they would ask me to almost mediate something between them. So I've been working with families for years, but this was my first chance going from the fun uncle teacher to the dad. Right. And I had this naive optimism. And as you know, I talked about in the book, I was running a real estate investment company that had gone nearly bankrupt in '08. It was losing millions of dollars and having to make our way back. And when you're doing that, you have a lot of focus, a lot of drive, a lot of attention. I want to make sure I was going to give these boys my attention. And so I started to set powerful rhythms in my life. And I know you heard me talk about that. I don't like the word habits. Habits seem so unintentional. Like you can have a bad drinking habit, you can have a bad smoking habit, you can have a habit of yelling in public for no reason. Rhythms have some musical elements, some soul, and you set them with intention and purpose and they hold space. And I wanted to set rhythms with my wife, with my kids. And so I just developed really this simple system. And I said, I'm going to be there on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, monthly, but I want to have some deeper pillars. And that's how the board meeting strategy was founded, the family board meeting strategy, where once a quarter, as an entrepreneur, since I can't change my mindset, I'm so wired as an entrepreneur, I've decided that my children and my wife are by far my most important clients and investors ever in any entrepreneurial pursuit that I do. And that keeps me honest. Some people say, oh, that sounds very derogatory. And I say, for me, that just keeps me honest. Sure. And so once a quarter, just like most businesses where they have a quarterly board meeting to reunite the team and look ahead to the next 90 days, it's exactly what I do with each one of my children. So every 90 days, I'm having a board meeting with each of them, an important meeting. You can call it daddy-daughter day, father-son time, mother-son time. It doesn't matter what you call it. But if you have a simple framework around it and a set rhythm time, it makes all the difference. So I spend a day every quarter with each of my kids, and there's only 3 rules to it: one-on-one without electronics, and a fun activity of their choice with focused reflection. And that third one is the most simple definition of experiential education there is. And I'm kind of an alternative education nutcase, as I told you, because I really want kids to learn and for adults to learn the most effective ways possible. And experiential education blows everything out of the water, everything. But it's harder to put together. It takes a little more time. It takes a little more personal attention, a little more vulnerability. But that's what I do with my sons. And getting back to Alden, within a year, he went from failing to getting the most improved student of the 3rd grade. He was the diagnosis of autism was retracted, and the night terrors were gone. And it took me years to not be able to cry when I said that, because I was like, who am I to make these differences? Right. And it's not that I was great. He did the heavy lifting, but all I did was create some space where he could feel loved, appreciated, and have trust and have fun. Fun is the currency of kids. And that made all the difference. For Jamie and I, we were ready. You know what I mean? We were ready. I had prepared this list, and some people are so against that list, like that's superficial. You're just, trying to create your spouse in the garage with power tools. And for me, it gave me real clarity. And I guess if it comes from here, that's fine. But mine came right from the gut that day. It was written out so quickly and so naturally that for us, we just shared the same core values and we were ready to meet each other. Having a blended family, that's another risk. But we were the most naturally blended family ever. I mean, the boys soon after asked me to adopt them. It was like the greatest honor in my life, sitting at the kitchen table and them asking me to adopt them. And then we went on to have 2 more children. And, we're the luckiest blended family in the world. Very entrepreneurial, very adventurous. We take these adventures together. Do we have arguments? Do we have teen moments? Do we have little, 2-year-old and 4-year-old meltdowns? Of course, we're normal. But God, we love each other and we love to take adventures together. And I think that makes all the difference. So
I almost miss some of the meltdowns. My kids are 6 and 8 going on 9, but those meltdowns were actually kind of fun. right? Looking back, they're not fun. They're not fun right then and there. You're like, oh my God, what is happening? What is
Yeah.
And you kind of know what the scenario is, and you set yourself up for it, but you're like, we got to go.
Yeah.
One of the so I love the idea of rhythm. I love the idea that that's intentional, and it's a break away from all this most oftentimes business speak of create the good habits, do discipline, this, that. And music is, I think, a little bit more inherent. And once you find like a groove or something like that, and you know that it fits you, right? You kind of get that idea, and you set that meter yourself in your own life. So I like how you taken away from going into habit, and this, it's not that it's not a habit. It's not that it's not discipline, because all those things are needed in music. But I like how you've kind of switched it over to that. When you went from a single eligible bachelor to being married and with children instantly, how hard was it for you to establish those rhythms? I mean, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not going to say it was easy, but it wasn't necessarily too hard. I guess there was some integration of figuring out what's best, but I try to keep it simple. I think that's as entrepreneurs, like where I say, have a board meeting once a quarter with each of your children. They go, great, I'm going to have one once a week. And then they set them up for the kill because, man, things move quick. And plus, that doesn't even give it the importance and symbolism I think that a 90-day interval does for these certain days. Of course, you spend time in between. But we try to take on too much. And what I try to do is let's do something simple that we're going to stick with and do over and over and see the foundation really take hold. So we didn't start with 157 rhythms to add into the family. We started with just a few simple ones. And, one of them being which we've done for years, is weekly date night with my wife. We all hear about that. I think Hal brought it up on the podcast. He's like, my wife and I started doing it. So we do date night with a question, where we did date night. Then it was date night with a question, where we make sure we find one powerful question that has nothing to do with the weather, or your favorite color, to get to know each other. And if you're playing that and doing a date a week, you're learning 50 deep answers to questions that you do every year about your wife. And it just opens up all sorts of lines of communications and understanding and more love and respect. And so that's just one thing we do. And then the quarterly board meetings. What I think the difference I made was, Brandon, was I just only picked a few simple ones. I didn't try to do too many. And that made a lot of the difference.
I mean, that's I think that's sage advice for anybody who is getting ready to step into a relationship. And it can probably be pretty easy to step in and be like, well, this is how I was raised and this is how we're dadding, right? This is how fatherhood's about to happen here. And you guys are just going to have to take it. It sounds like you took like a simple, even keeled approach. And you, now, if my understanding too is, your wife is also an educator too. Did she help you make that transition pretty easily?
Yeah, I mean, she's very trained in Waldorf and Montessori education, and they're about rhythms and certain simplification of the home life, where it's not too complicated. So she was helpful, but we just shared some simple core values. Like neither one of us has ever said a bad word to the boys about her ex, because that just could cause confusion and pain to them. They've asked questions. They know exactly. There was very openness, but we've never talked bad about that. Neither one of us is heavy drinkers or into drugs. It wasn't, see, I was a bachelor in my 30s, but I was way past the age of, at least for me, I wasn't a goer outer all the time. I didn't enjoy that anymore. Right. I wasn't a late night guy. So we were both happy to be home and then take adventures. Again, there's that importance of core values. Like we were, prepared to focus and not to, be criticizing and condemning, or there wasn't any sort of vices of gambling or alcohol or drugs or anything. And it wasn't like people go, oh man, you had an instant family. But, I have, tons of nieces and nephews, and I wasn't a go out guy anymore. It wasn't like I was in my early 20s going out. So it wasn't a big transition for me. And again, I think that's where timing and core values are so important with getting together with the right person. Right. That made a big difference. And it made it, I don't want to say seamless, but it made it a lot easier.
You were ready for it.
Yeah. I think we both were. So that made it easier on the boys too. for me to do that. And we got along. We were beach kids. We all loved the beach and outdoor adventures, and they're boys, wrestling and this and that. And that's what I was. So it was pretty easy to assimilate with that.
Right on. I love that. I love that. You've got, so you've got your family board meetings, and the one thing that caught my attention was your education matrix. And I'm assuming that you use this primarily in any family setting, but I love it. You've got financial intelligence, relationship skills, personal development, and that's not you've got those are your headers, and you've got a lot built into that. Personal development for me came at a later age, like just a couple of years ago. My understanding is too that it came to you at a very early age. What would you say the advantage of some of that personal development at that early age was for you?
I think personal development, again, it got this woo-woo context, like it was all late night TV, like scam infomercial stuff. And it's just not true. It is a true science of know thyself. The old Aristotle, know thyself. We go through all these years of school learning dates and this and that, and we don't get the chance to learn about ourselves. And personal development is about learning about yourself, understanding how you tick. And that's such an important thing. Imagine you hand someone a Lamborghini and you say, look, go ahead and drive this. And you don't give them any driving instructions. I think personal development is like driving instructions for ourselves. And sure, the people that have it, I think, are happier and more successful personally and professionally than don't. And it amazes me that it's not core curriculum. It just amazes me. When I go over, and I've done this toughest times exercise with actually Hal was in the room for John Vroman's dad's group one time. And I did the toughest times exercise to prove to people what should our kids really learn. And we talk about, okay, toughest times. Wow, we've all been through some tough times. What would have helped us get through these times either more, successfully or avoid them altogether? And those three things, personal development, financial intelligence, relationship skills, all get called upon. Whether your career is the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, it doesn't matter. These get called upon all the time. So personal development is absolutely pinnacle. I believe it's achieving. Kids develop individuality starting at the age of 9. They are ready to learn the principles of personal development by the age of 11. And I've done enough retreats and enough workshops and all that to watch kids this age take hold and go, gosh, why haven't I been learning this? So they're ready at age 11. They don't have to be, waiting like most of us, 20s or 30s to even stumble across this Rosetta Stone. So I think the earlier, the better. You can start to plant some light seeds, from 0 to 10. But by age 11, man, they are ready. They are absolutely ready.
I love it. I love it. Well, and if you don't mind, we'll flip this over into fatherhood, just in of itself, right? You learned this from your father. What was the relationship kind of with your father, if you'd like to share that?
Yeah, my dad and I. Well, about 8 years ago, my dad got sick, and it was basically you got 2 years to live, or someone's got to donate a kidney to you. So long story short, we went through an incredible journey. My stubborn little Irish leprechaun father was going to deny the kidney. And a lot of the lessons I get in family board meetings came through this thing of the power of spending one-on-one time, because we never spent one-on-one time together and working through things. It brought us closer. He's doing great. I'm doing great. Going through an event like that just can't not change you. In fact, sure. I say the things that have softened me and strengthened me at the same time the most are adopting my sons and donating a kidney to my father. Right. We weren't that close growing up. Definitely not. So I feel close, and my parents struggled financially, always. But to my dad's credit, he was the one who always said, do something on your own, go off on your own, do it on your own, be your own boss, take your own business, because if not, you're trapped and you have a ceiling and you cannot have true freedom, and he had businesses that didn't work. So, but struggling financially was a big part of, my life when I was younger. And they worked hard and were did their best, but I always wanted to have, they were never taught financial intelligence. So it was harder, and he couldn't be around that much, and it made things stressful. And honest, honorable, we always had a love for each other, but we weren't that close. So I feel very blessed that I know a lot of people that if their fathers passed on and they never had a rekindling like my dad and I did.
Right.
It's definitely been a blessing that I never expected to this degree, at least. So,
Sure.
so hopefully that answers it. It wasn't horrible. There wasn't, alcohol or drugs or abuse, but we weren't that close. There was definitely tension. And I think a lot of that was caused by, but financial struggles can be really hard on families. They can be really
Sure.
hard. So.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. What would you say the purpose of fatherhood is?
I think so let me take it this way. I've had a really big lesson coming for the last 2 years. And a lot of the times with a badge of honor on the chest, a lot of us say, we provide and protect our family, and what I've learned is if you're only providing and protecting, you don't take time to love them.
Mm.
And love is so different than providing and protecting. Yeah, there's some crossover, but they're different. And what I had to learn was I was so dedicated with the best intentions to provide for them, to protect them from this. You're not taking the space to just love them. So I think as real fatherhood, you're just supposed to of course you're going to provide and protect, but you got to love them. And love comes by being your authentic self, supporting them with their passions and dreams, not doing their push-ups for them. I'm not going to do that. But supporting them with that, and enjoying them, and taking adventures with them. So that's what fatherhood's about for me. Is I got your back. That was the biggest lesson with my dad and the kidney thing. I said, I think for the first time in 36 years, my dad really knew I had his back, and vice versa. And that's what I want my kids to know. I got your back. I'm going to support you. I'm not going to do the push-ups for you. We have certain core values that we're going to go, live with. But I got your back, and I don't just love them. I like them. A mentor of mine who's been married 50 years, met his wife when he was like 14, a guy, Neil. He said, we all talk about loving our spouse, right? It's important to like them too, because love can sort of like, oh, this is what we signed up for. We have to love them.
Sure.
And he's Aussie, so he says, oh, we're best mates, my wife and I, and it's like, that's how I am with my wife. But of course I get, short with crazy teen stuff and then breaking this or that, but it's like, I like them. Like I get a kick out of them. And it's like, you got to like them, and there's a fine line between being their friend at times and being their leader. And you have to lead because, they need that kind of guidance at this age. But, I think it's important to actually like your kids, not feel it's like some obligation checklist or a merit badge. So that's what fatherhood's about for me.
I love that answer. I mean, I honestly think that, before you have children, you always hear people say that's a blessing and all that other jazz. But when you a little bit later, you're like, it is kind of a blessing, right? You're like, this is a great opportunity. And so we got to take that on. Right. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. So that's really cool. So Napoleon Hill was given to you, like at what age did your dad, introduce you to thinking over?
I think it was about 11, 12. Yeah.
Wow.
That Dale Carnegie. So my dad was always a salesman. So he believed in that. So I definitely had exposure to both, Carnegie and Napoleon Hill about age 11. So that definitely changes things because it was a subject most people aren't aware of, and just having the awareness that, look, you have a certain power within your mind to do certain things that may seem impossible, but even, as Hal talks about, affirmations or, visualization and setting goals and, the power of overcoming fears and walking through them. I mean, this was the power of the mastermind, like-minded people sharing and cooperating to push each other up. I mean, I knew about these at a young age, and I think I tried to turn my back on them. Like, okay, this is too voodoo, too weird. No one's talking about this, but it's almost like the seed was shoved into me. You know what I mean? It's like it's planted and it's starting to grow, and like you can't ignore it any longer. And I think I know, and that's what I'm hoping. It's almost like a positive festering within me. But I knew it was there.
Festering.
Yeah, you can't even ignore it to a certain point. So by the time I was in my late teens to early 20s, man, it just, any of those principles, I just knew I couldn't turn my back on them. They were so, sunrise, sunset, gravity principles that I knew the importance. I had seen them at work. So it's that, I think if just introducing it to our kids, because most people, when I talk, they're like, I didn't even realize, like I say to that, like I learned some of this, but like the subject of emotional intelligence or emotional awareness, like I had no idea as a grumpy teen that those two words could even go together. Emotional and intelligence. Like,
Sure.
So just getting our kids the awareness is such an important starting point, just to open their eyes to it and know it's there. I think if you just get that done, you're 80% ahead of most people out there.
Nice. What were there any other books in your youth or ever even since then that have had such an impact on you?
Yeah, I think that, Think and Grow Rich and I didn't read the whole books. I was just exposed to them. Think and Grow Rich and How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie. I was introduced young and some of the principles. I've obviously since read both of them several times. But I'd say the next group of serious books came from another mentor of mine, a friend of my parents, that gave me, again, it probably helped create the matrix, because I'm like, these make all the difference. These make all the difference. Of course you have to have certain skill, whether it's a realtor or an engineer or a business owner or an athlete or an artist, whatever that is. But what really supports that skill, that one specialized skill you'll do as a career? Well, it was personal development, relationship skills, and financial intelligence. You have those built around a skill, you can do that. And when I was in my early 20s or about 21, I read 2 books simultaneously within a few months. And that was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is all about really very well laid out. It can be a dry book, but it's incredible, the framework.
It's got a great opening.
Oh yeah. The stories. And so they have the personal development and relationship skills in there. And then the other book I read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which was given to me, Kiyosaki's book. And I knew one of the guys behind it who had actually started it. Keith Cunningham mentored me, was a big part of actually helping create that. And he mentored me for 5 years, Keith. So that was a blessing to be able to get so close to him. But those 2 books, I said, man, and kids have really good bullshit detectors. When we teach something to a kid in school, they're saying to themselves, big deal, how's this going to help me? Not 5 years from now or maybe 10 years from now, but now. Right. And whenever I learned personal development, relationship skills, or financial intelligence, it made sense to me, like, yes, I'm going to put this to work, and this can help me today, now. And that speaks volumes. So those 2 books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and 7 Habits, were almost like those were the ignition to go in the direction that I went, without a doubt.
Okay. No, great books. What about anything in parenting after you became a parent that you maybe wasn't directly parenting, but you were able to apply it to parenting very well?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Simplicity Parenting. That's a phenomenal book for anyone out there. Really, really good stuff. Again, my wife is, very into Montessori and Waldorf education, and that has principles within it, but it's simplifying the home life to make it more enjoyable, more meaningful. It's a great book. Very easy to follow and implement. Conscious Parenting by Dr. Shefali. She's a friend. We've taught at a retreat together. And her basic message is, if you're going to parent your kids, you have to parent yourself first. And I've really learned that you got to work on yourself constantly to be able to be the best parent. And that's what conscious parenting has, a lot of other elements, but that's a really important core message to it. So those 2 books would be good ones.
Very cool. Thank you for those. What would you like to, if your kids pick this up 10 years from now, what would you like to thank them for?
For taking their own authentic path. Not anything to please me or their mom or their friends, but taking the true path they wanted to take and doing their best in doing so. That's it. I don't want them, that's the rule. I'll support you, but I want you to be true to yourself and live by certain core values, but but yeah, that's sticking to their own authentic self and following that path.
That's great. That's great. I'm sure you're trying to help them to do that, right? It really sounds like that's what you're giving them, all the tools in order to follow their own paths.
Yep.
Anything, father related or otherwise that you want to hit on before we let you go?
Apologize. That's a big one that's been coming up in the last few weeks. When you mess up, apologize, especially the brawny entrepreneur fathers out there. You can sell your way out of it or power your way and go, yeah, I messed up, but too bad. I'm the captain of this ship. Have some humility, apologize. If you're short, if you're quick to judge, if whatever it is, apologize, admit you're wrong and apologize. It goes a long way. I know that's the thing where I've worked with retreats and even myself, my own mistakes. Have the humility to apologize when you're wrong. It goes a long way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that should show up later. You want to hope in their own lives and their ability to do the same.
Yeah.
Awesome. Where should I send people to find you?
Yeah. If you want to hear more about what we do to help families, then just go to 18summers.com. We've named the company that based off a mentor of mine years ago said, Jim, you don't listen to anything else I say. Just remember, we got 18 summers. Do the math, make the most. I've got grown daughters. He was in his 70s, incredible shape. He's like, I'm very close to my daughters, but I'm telling you, it's different. And we still have fun together. But those first 18 seasons, as 18 summers was his favorite season. That's mine too. He says, get hold of them. Make the most of them. Do the math, because it changes once they go out the door to have their own adult adventures. So make the most of that time. So, you said you got a 6 and an 8-year-old. You go, okay, no, I got plenty of time. Then you start to do the math. You're like, wait a minute, I only got 10 left of the, I only got 12. And it gets you thinking. I think it's positive motivation, positive push. And you want to make the most of all the seasons. But also it doesn't, time can be a tricky thing. And we don't want to fool ourselves that we have more than we think we do.
Right. No, fair enough. It goes by, it does go by quick. I mean, listen, everybody out there, before you have kids and somebody comes up and says, it's going to go by quick. It does, because you want us to, not with me. It totally does. All right, cool. So 18summers.com, and where can they find you most? Is it like Instagram, Facebook? Where do you spend some time?
Facebook, they can go to our 18 Summers page. We do a couple updates a week there, just with some camaraderie of people wanting to put the board meeting practice into practice, share some different family things that are going on, see the adventures our family's taken. Facebook's the best way to get in touch with us. You can go to our 18 Summers thing, get and ask to join the group.
Awesome, Jim. Thanks for stopping by today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.